Hey guys, thanks for joining me today on another episode of Cartels on Earth. Today we're going to be wrapping up the episode on Avianca Flight 203. Not a lot of information left, but there's a lot of stuff here that's still, I think, very important to share with you guys in regards to this investigation and how flawed it was, and how many theories are out there still. So I'm going to jump right into it. Today we're going to be really discussing the passenger list and how much of a mess that was originally. There was a lot of false information. There was a lot of just confusion between everyone investigating this when it came to the passengers. Between Avianca, the Aerocivil, which is the Civil Aviation Unit of Colombia, between the FBI. There was a lot of just nothing correlated, nothing matched up. First of all, there was 107 passengers on board, 101 passengers and 6 crew members, so 107 people. They were only able to identify 91 bodies. In one instance, the medical examiner was so flawed in his own investigation that he actually identified a body as the husband of a particular woman. They gave the woman the husband's body in a closed coffin. She didn't want to see the body. They had told her it was very badly burned and scarred, so she didn't want to see it, but they confirmed that it was him. 2 weeks afterwards, she buried the body. There's a grieving period in Colombia. It's about 8 days, and then you bury the body. Once that happened, she, in her mind, was okay, moving on with this, recovering, grieving. She gets a call from the medical examiner 2 weeks later and is told, "Ma'am, we have your husband." So, who was the person she buried? That body to this day is still buried. She made an interview in Colombia for the El Espectador, a Colombian national newspaper. That body remains buried. No one ever wanted it. No one ever claimed it. The medical examiner didn't say, well, where's the body so we can recover it and find out who it really is. She confirmed that the second body that she got was in fact her husband because at this point she said, oh, I want to see it. I want to see the body. And it was her husband. So that first body remains buried, and we don't know who it belongs to, what family member didn't get their body, or was this the so-called person that brought the bomb on board the plane? We will never know. No one's ever done anything about it. So it just goes to show you how flawed the investigation was. Now, a lot of something that happened a lot, usually when there's some kind of disaster like this, they list the manifest, the passenger list, the people that were on board the plane, confirmed list of the passengers. Now, Avianca and Aerocivil came up with a list a couple of times that had 2 names that were pretty much considered ghost names. They did not match anything else in their paperwork. It didn't match at all. In a later investigation, no one really was able to understand why these names came up. It was 2 names, Julio Santo Domingo and Alberto Prieto. Now, these 2 names, one of them in particular is very interesting because the owner of the airline at the time was named Julio Santo Domingo. Now, obviously, we know by history he's famous enough, he's rich, we know he wasn't on the plane, he was alive, he did news conferences, so why is his name on the manifest that Avianca is releasing and the Aerocivil is releasing? We don't know that, it's still not known. The other name, there was a lot of confusion with this name. It was listed, the manifest was listed in national newspapers and TV and radio. A couple of days later, a gentleman by the name of Alfonso Prieto, so the name on the list is Alberto Prieto, and then a couple of days later, this gentleman by the name of Alfonso Prieto comes forward and says, well, I was supposed to be on that flight that morning, but when I arrived at the airport that morning, I arrived so early that they moved me up to an earlier flight. So he was alive, and it was the same last name. Both names had the same last name, and the first name was the same, the first letter, Alfonso and Alberto. So as far as Alfonso and Alberto, was that like a mistake, just because very close to similarities? Was he originally on that list, and then because he got moved to an earlier flight, his name was still on the list, and there was a mistake in typing or between someone writing something and it looked like Alberto but it was Alfonso, or vice versa? We don't know. The name Julio Santo Domingo, it was just a name that randomly showed up on these lists by Avianca and Aerocivil, and both the National Police and the FBI couldn't understand why these names were on the list. They made no sense. No one had purchased a ticket under those names. There was no reason for those names to be on the manifest. So it was quite interesting, but it's something that still to this day exists on that paperwork. Something else that I want to point out, one of the bodies that were identified during the identification process of these people, of these passengers, his name was Victor Molina. Now, there's the name Victor Molina. They identified him as Victor Molina through DNA or whatever it was that they utilized at that time to identify a body. But nowhere on any lists of people who had purchased tickets or on the manifest was that name on paperwork. So, was he flying under a false identity? Was this one of maybe the ghost names? There was so many questions. There was names that shouldn't be there. There were names that should be there but weren't there. There was a victim on the ground who died on the plane crash whose identification in his pockets had one name, but his name was nowhere. That name on his ID never showed up on any of the Avianca list or the Aerocivil list. It made the list that Avianca and Aerocivil had names that no one had proof were even on board the plane. They had the name of a gentleman who was alive in another city because he had catched an earlier flight. For weeks, there was just constant issues with the lists. They never matched up. Why do you have these lists with names that shouldn't be on the plane, and you have lists of names that are people who are alive and they're on camera on a television saying, I'm not dead, I'm right here, my name is on this list, but I'm not dead. There was so much confusion. It's a ridiculous amount of confusion, and to this day, they still don't have an answer as to why these names, these ghost names, Julio Santo Domingo was on it, and they can't even say if the name Alberto Prieto was a ghost name as well, as they coined it in Colombia. They just literally were ghost names. Or is that Alberto Prieto, in reality Alfonso Prieto, which was the gentleman who was supposed to be on that flight, but then he arrived too early at the airport, and so the airline moved them to an earlier flight, and so he didn't board the original flight that exploded. Excuse me. So, a lot of confusion. It just shows you how messed up this investigation was. Now, I want to point out also names that were not on this list. Mr. Cesar Gaviria. We all know who he is. At that point, at that moment, he was the presidential candidate for the country. He would later become the Colombian president. The story is said that he was a passenger that was going to be on this flight, and the reason for the bombing, that Pablo Escobar put a bomb on this plane with a person that he hired, was to kill President Gaviria because he was taking over the place of Luis Carlos Galan, who had been assassinated not too long ago by the cartel. President Gaviria, well, at this point, the presidential candidate Gaviria, Cesar Gaviria, was not supposed to be on this flight. He never had a ticket for this flight. He was not on a manifest by Avianca. He was not on a manifest by Aerocivil. Now, a lot of people will say, well, okay, they probably just changed his name or made his name fake. Okay, that could be, but then what about his security detail? He's not traveling alone. He knows there's threats out against him by the Medellin cartel. Why is he not traveling alone? He wouldn't be traveling alone. So where are his security detail agents? Those names would be on a list as well. As far as they know, he had about a detail about 8 people. So that means 8 plus him is 9. So if you release a manifest, if you release the papers that have the names of the passengers that boarded this flight, if he was supposed to be on that plane, you would have 9 people unaccounted for. You would have the name of 9 people there, even if they use false names for security purposes. You would have those 9 names there that are unaccounted for. That was never a case with that. You had 2 names unaccounted for. You had 2 ghost names. But he was traveling with more than 2 people. He himself is 1. He wasn't traveling with a security guard. There also raises the question that if the government or intelligence agencies knew that there was going to be something going on and they went to the airport as it's portrayed in movies and shows like Narcos, Why would they just come and save this one person and his security detail, but still let the plane go and maybe or may not explode? In a world we live in particular in that time of the world, in that time of what was happening, you don't do those kind of things in a country where there's narco-terrorism at the moment. It's a threat that is very credible. It's from the Medellin cartel, which aren't joking. That never made sense. Mr. Cesar Gaviria, now afterwards, he went on record, as did his political advisors who were in charge of his campaign at that time, and they went on record stating they never had intentions of boarding that plane. They never even flew commercial during the time for security reasons. So why would the Colombian people, why would anyone think that he was going to be on this plane? He never even flew commercial in that time frame. On top of that, he was running an election at the time. He was in the presidential election. So he had just been in Cali. This flight that exploded was on its way to Cali. He had just been in Cali 4 days earlier. Why would he be going back? Nothing made sense. So like I said, he wasn't supposed to be on this plane. It is confirmed knowledge. He stated it. His people have stated. There's public records. He was never supposed to be on this flight. He wasn't even flying commercial. All the flights that he had done from before, to Cali, to Bogota, to anywhere in the country when he was doing for his presidential election, were straight on private planes. They were smart private Cessna planes or Lear jets. He never flew commercial. Why during this one time would he fly commercial? It made absolutely no sense. On top of that, that flight was going to Cali, which he had just come back from 4 days earlier. There is absolutely no reason for him to be going back to Cali. Again, here we come back. It's almost like the first video. Nothing matches. Nothing matches from anybody. It just doesn't match. It's very surprising. The investigation was flawed. The investigation was messed up. There was just too many questions. There's too many problems with the investigation. Nothing made sense. This just raises so many questions. What was this a cover-up? Was this what were they trying to cover up, or what were they trying to hide? Why were there? Never an investigation. When you're doing an investigation about something like this, you find the answers to the questions you have. The investigation doesn't end, and you have more questions than you did answers. You don't do that. This investigation still has way more questions than the answers it could possibly have. It's very surprising. It's very aggravating. I think it makes absolutely no sense. And again, everything that I've shared, it's not really answers. They're just questions to I haven't shared questions. Well, yes, in a sense, everything I've shared is information in reports and files and investigations, but they're not answers. They just bring more questions, and it's very frustrating, I think. And it gives another theory to what happened to this flight. Was it really a bomb, or was it something else? I think there's a lot of evidence throughout everything I've shared, and there's so much more, but I kind of have to make it smaller, where nothing adds up. Nothing adds up at all. So, that's about it. I'm going to call it a day on Avianca Flight 203. I'm going to make one more video after this with my opinion on what I think about this investigation. It'll be a short one, but I really want to hear what you guys think at the end about everything. Do you think it was a bomb? Do you think it was a mechanical issue? Or do you think it was something else? I'd love to see what you guys think. Let me know. Comment below. Message me on Instagram. Subscribe. And stay tuned for my opinion video. And there's quite a few more videos coming up. I got a couple of interesting ones coming up, including La Kika, which is very much tied into Avianca Flight 203. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.